Right now, somewhere in your kitchen or bathroom, there is probably a bottle sitting on a shelf promising to help you sleep tonight. Maybe it says nighttime relief. Maybe it says non-habit forming. Maybe it says deep, restful sleep. The labels always promise peace. But if you are over 50 years old, there is a good chance you already know how that story ends. You take one pill for a few nights, then it stops working the same way it did before. So the dosage changes, or the brand changes, or you start waking up groggy, heavy, foggy in the head. And somehow, the one thing you wanted most, real rest, still never fully comes back. About 25 miles from where I am sitting right now, up in the hills outside a little Appalachian town most people have never heard of, there was a woman named Evelyn Carter. Evelyn lived to 91 years old. She never owned a sleep medication in her entire life, not once. I am not talking about a woman who slept badly and just tolerated it. I mean, she slept deeply, woke up before sunrise every morning, worked a garden into her late 80s, quilted by hand, read without glasses until almost 90. People in town used to joke that Evelyn slept like the mountains themselves. Her family had been in those hills since the late 1800s, long before pharmacies, long before prescription sleep aids, long before Americans became one of the most sleep-deprived populations on Earth. And the reason Evelyn slept the way she did came down to a drink she made every night in a cast iron pot that sat beside her wood stove. By the end of this video, I am going to show you the exact 4 ingredients that went into that drink. Ingredients you can buy for less than the price of 1 bottle of sleeping pills. But more importantly, I am going to share something I found buried inside a sleep study published in 2018. One sentence, just one sentence hidden deep in the discussion section that explains why isolated mountain communities were sleeping longer and waking up less during the night long before modern sleep medicine existed. This matters whether you are living in a cabin out in the country or whether you are sitting in a suburban house right now, staring at the ceiling at 2:13 in the morning, wondering why your body forgot how to rest. Because the truth is, your body did not forget. It was trained out of it. Evelyn Carter was 91 years old when I met her. Tiny woman, barely over 5 feet tall, hands worn from decades of work, fingernails permanently stained from blackberries and garden soil. She had this old rocking chair by the stove, and every night around 8 o'clock, she'd start preparing the same drink her mother taught her to make during the winters back in the 1930s. No television blaring in the background, no sleeping pills in the cabinet, no white noise machine, no melatonin gummies lined up on the counter like candy. Just the drink, the fire, and a routine she followed for almost 80 years. And meanwhile, I watched my own father go the opposite direction. My dad worked hard his whole life. Factory shifts, long hours, good man. But sometime in his late 50s, sleep stopped coming easy to him. First, it was over-the-counter pills, then stronger prescriptions, then combinations of things, sleep medication, nighttime cold medicine, whiskey before bed, whatever gave him 4 or 5 hours of unconsciousness. By the time he was Evelyn's age, he could barely sleep without chemical help. He'd wake up exhausted even after 8 hours in bed. His hands shook in the mornings. He'd fall asleep in his chair watching television with the blue glow still flickering across his face. Evelyn spent maybe $20 a year on the ingredients for her drink. My father spent thousands chasing sleep that never really came. That math bothered me, so I started asking questions. And what I learned, sitting in Appalachian kitchens from eastern Kentucky all the way through western Virginia, is that mountain families understood something about sleep that modern America forgot. Here's the first thing you need to understand. The modern sleep industry is not built around teaching your body how to rest naturally. It's built around sedating symptoms long enough to keep you functional. That's different. A sleeping pill does not necessarily create healthy sleep. In many cases, it creates unconsciousness. Your body still misses critical stages of natural recovery even while you're technically asleep, and the side effects pile up fast. Morning grogginess, memory problems, dependency, increased fall risk in older adults. Even next day, cognitive impairment. The National Institutes of Health has repeatedly documented the risks associated with long-term sleep medication use, especially in adults over 60. Evelyn didn't know any of that science. She didn't need to. She only knew what her mother taught her and what her grandmother taught before that. The Mountain families had a nighttime drink they passed down through generations because it worked long before anyone put sleep into a capsule. And the drink itself is almost laughably simple. The base ingredient was warm whole milk, not skim milk, not powdered milk, real milk. Mountain families believed warm milk settled the nerves, but modern research later discovered something interesting. Milk naturally contains tryptophan, an amino acid connected to serotonin and melatonin production. But the milk alone wasn't the secret. The second ingredient was raw honey, usually 1 spoonful. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most people think honey is just sugar, but raw honey affects the body differently than refined sugar because it releases slowly through the night. Some sleep researchers believe a small amount of natural carbohydrate before bed may help stabilize liver glycogen during sleep, reducing the stress hormone spikes that wake people around 2 or 3 in the morning. Evelyn called it feeding the night. She'd laugh when she said that. Body can't rest hungry, she used to tell me. The third ingredient was nutmeg, just a pinch. Not enough to overpower the drink, just enough. Now mountain families didn't know the chemical names involved, but nutmeg contains compounds associated historically with calming effects and relaxation. It had been used in old European folk medicine for centuries before it ever reached the Appalachian Mountains. And the final ingredient was the most important one, dried chamomile. Not from a tea bag, actual dried chamomile flowers hanging in bundles near the kitchen window. Chamomile has been studied repeatedly for mild calming and sleep-supporting properties. Compounds inside chamomile interact with receptors in the brain associated with relaxation. But again, Evelyn never read a study, she just slept. That's the part modern people miss. We keep waiting for permission from laboratories to trust things our grandparents already proved over decades of living. The entire drink cost maybe 40 cents to make. Compare that to prescription sleep medication, doctor visits, nighttime supplements, sleep trackers, special mattresses, sound machines, and all the other products Americans buy trying to solve a problem mountain families addressed with 4 ingredients and a quiet evening routine. But here's where the story changes, because the drink was only half the secret. And you need to understand this next part, because the reason you've never heard about these Appalachian sleep traditions isn't because they failed. It's because modern America built an economy around exhaustion. In the late 1800s, Appalachian communities were still largely disconnected from industrial city life. Sunset mattered. Darkness mattered. Families rose with daylight and rested with darkness because there was no alternative. But beginning in the early 1900s, electric light changed everything. Factories could run longer, businesses could stay open later. Americans started sleeping less. By 1910, researchers and newspaper writers were already documenting what they called nervous exhaustion in urban populations. Sleeplessness became profitable. Then came radio, then television, then fluorescent office lighting, then smartphones glowing directly into people's eyes at midnight. And through all of it, mountain communities stayed behind the curve longer than most of America. I found a collection of oral history interviews archived through Appalachian State University, where elderly residents repeatedly described sleep as something sacred, not optional, not something squeezed between productivity. One woman born in 1912 described her family extinguishing lamps an hour after supper almost every night in winter because the body belonged to the dark. Think about that sentence. The body belonged to the dark. Modern America would consider that primitive. But sleep researchers now understand that artificial light at night disrupts melatonin production, circadian rhythm, hormone balance, and deep sleep quality. The mountains figured that out without laboratories. And while the rest of America became dependent on stimulation during the day and sedation at night, Appalachian families held on to routines that protected sleep naturally. Meanwhile, the sleep industry exploded. Mattresses, prescription medications, sleep clinics, blue light glasses, sleep apps, magnesium powders, melatonin supplements. The global sleep aid market is now worth tens of billions of dollars annually. And despite all that money, Americans are sleeping worse than ever. Nearly 1/3 of adults regularly fail to get enough sleep. That's astonishing. We spend more money chasing sleep than any civilization in history, and we're more exhausted than ever. Meanwhile, the old mountain women kept boiling milk on wood stoves and sleeping through the night. Now, I'm not telling you never to see a doctor. If you have severe insomnia, sleep apnea, or a medical condition, you need real medical care. But the everyday breakdown of natural sleep, the chronic restlessness, the midnight waking, the nervous overstimulation, a huge portion of that may come from the way modern life disconnected us from the habits human beings followed for thousands of years. There is research supporting pieces of this. Search for circadian rhythm, artificial light, sleep, study. Search for evening light, melatonin suppression. Search for sleep fragmentation, blue light, exposure. The evidence is there. But the old mountain families didn't need journals to tell them what worked. They watched it happen every night in their own homes. And there's one particular practice I found buried inside an Appalachian sleep archive that explains why some elders in these communities continued sleeping deeply into old age while younger generations started struggling. That practice almost disappeared because nobody could sell it. Now, if you're sitting there thinking this only works for people living out in cabins somewhere, stay with me because this next part is specifically for you. The man living in a subdivision, the woman in an apartment, the retired couple in the same home they have had for 35 years. You do not need to move to the mountains to start sleeping differently this week. You need 4 ingredients and about 15 quiet minutes before bed. Here is the exact drink Evelyn made. 1 cup of whole milk. Warm it slowly, never boiling. Add 1 teaspoon of raw honey, a small pinch of ground nutmeg, very small. Then 1 teaspoon of dried chamomile flowers or chamomile tea. Let it steep for about 5 minutes. That's it. No chemicals you can't pronounce, no warning labels, no dependency. Mountain families drank this about 45 minutes before sleep. But the real key was the ritual around it. No bright lights afterward, no television, no loud conversation. The drink signaled to the body that the day was ending. Within a few nights, most people notice they fall asleep easier. Within a few weeks, many notice they stop waking up as often in the middle of the night. And perhaps most importantly, they wake up feeling less chemically exhausted. Not drugged, rested. That's different. Now I know what some people are thinking. You're telling me a cup of milk and herbs works better than modern sleep medicine? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the modern world convinced millions of people that sleep is something you purchase instead of something you protect. That's the difference. And the mountain families understood that long before sleep became commercialized. I told you earlier, there was one sentence buried in a modern sleep discussion that explains why Appalachian elders often slept differently from younger generations. I want to give you that now because this is the part almost nobody talks about anymore. But before I do, one quick thing. Over the last few years, I've been collecting these old Appalachian routines, the winter remedies, the sleep traditions, the food preservation methods, the old mountain habits that kept families healthy long before modern convenience took over. I've organized them season by season and room by room into a guide I call the Mountain Home Companion. If you want it, it's linked below. But stay here because this next part matters more than any recipe. Buried inside multiple discussions about traditional sleep patterns is a simple observation researchers kept stumbling across. The elders who slept best followed consistent darkness rituals. That was the phrase, darkness rituals. In Appalachian homes, especially before electricity became widespread, families dimmed their environment gradually. Lamps lowered, voices softened, tasks slowed down. The body received a signal every single night that rest was approaching. Modern neuroscience now understands that the brain depends heavily on environmental cues for melatonin production and circadian timing. But the mountain people already knew, not scientifically, practically. Evelyn had one habit she never skipped. After drinking her sleep tonic, she would sit quietly for 10 minutes beside the stove with only lamplight. No conversation, no stimulation, just stillness. She called it letting the mind settle. That might be the real secret. Not the milk, not the chamomile, the transition. Modern people go from chaos directly into bed and wonder why the nervous system never powers down. The mountain families created a bridge between wakefulness and sleep, and nobody could profit from teaching people to sit quietly in dim light for 10 minutes every night. So the practice disappeared. Here is exactly how to try this tonight. About an hour before bed, dim the lights in your home. Turn off the television. Put the phone away. Make the drink. 1 cup warm, whole milk. 1 teaspoon raw honey. Pinch of nutmeg. Chamomile. Drink it slowly. Then sit quietly for 10 minutes in low light. No scrolling, no news, no stimulation. Then go to bed. Do it for 14 nights straight. Most people notice the first change in the middle of the night. They stop waking up as often. Then mornings start changing too. Clearer head, calmer nerves, less exhaustion. Not because the mountains had magic, because they protected sleep like it mattered, and it does. Think about the math for a second because I really want this to land. Americans spend billions every year trying to force sleep chemically. Prescription medications, supplements, devices, special mattresses, apps, most of it treating symptoms instead of restoring rhythm. Meanwhile, Appalachian families pass down a nighttime practice that cost almost nothing. Warm milk, honey, chamomile, darkness, stillness, routine. That was the system. And maybe the most important thing I can tell you tonight is this. Your inability to sleep may not mean your body is broken. It may mean your environment became unnatural. The mountain families understood that before modern sleep, medicine even existed. If you are the kind of person who believes old knowledge still has value, then try the drink tonight, not next month, tonight. I want you to tell me something in the comments below. What did your grandparents do before bed when you were growing up? Did they drink tea? Sit quietly? Turn the lights low? I think a lot more of this knowledge survived in American families than people realize. And if you found value in this, subscribe, because every week I am digging deeper into the forgotten routines that kept mountain families strong long before modern America convinced us we needed a product for every problem. Next week, I am going to share what Appalachian woodsmen used for aching joints during freezing winters. One of the ingredients is probably sitting in your kitchen right now, and most people throw it away without realizing what it can do. You will not want to miss that one. Until then, make the drink, dim the lights, let your mind settle. The mountains figured out a long time ago that rest was not weakness, it was survival.